From the only boulevard named after Expo, we're watching Santa Barbara. Welcome to week 100 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have finished episode 485. Oh, let me just change that again. Welcome to week 100 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
Brought to you, as always, by this Cheers mug that we got here. When we were in Boston, we went to Cheers, the bar, which looks like Cheers from the outside. And then we had dinner at Cheers, the bar that looks like Cheers. Doesn't look like Cheers at all. It's just a huge restaurant where we got that souvenir. And we saw Janice Page on an episode of Lanigan's Rabbi that we watched once we finished our Heck Ramses in our Sunday Mystery Wheel rewatch. All right, back in 1986, it's June 23rd, and we've watched episode 485. David finds that Julia has put a rock into his bag. So I guess she did do that. Just wasn't clearly visible on the VHS copy that we had. Of course, that doesn't make everything else she did dumb. So he spends the entire episode searching for the dumbbell while Julia peers out of the bathroom, still pretending to have a shower. Someone phones for Julia, and David says she's not available. So I have no idea who phoned, or even if it really was for Julia, or if it was someone else calling for him and he's pretending. So, but, who would be calling her? Augusta, Mason, Cruz, not Pearl. So, seems unlikely they would just drive up there if they couldn't reach her by phone. So I don't know if there's a hope of that. But I suspect Sheila will be the first person to arrive at the cabin.
I suspect so as well.
And then there may be a day of drama before whoever's been trying to reach Julia finally gives up and tries to drive up. Julia spends the episode trying to get the bathroom window open, unsuccessfully. Now, your mom's house had all these painted shut windows, so I'm wondering if it's something like that. At the end of the episode, David finds the bathroom door locked and picks up the axe and advances menacingly towards the door.
And here we have a little bit of a callback to The Shining, I think. And maybe we'll see. So far, David's just being sort of eerily quiet. He's a very quiet person, which is becoming more and more of a sinister quiet. But it'll be interesting to see if he goes sort of full Jack Nicholson, if they go all the way with this Shining.
Well, the dumb thing is, he hasn't committed any crimes that they can convict him for.
Yeah.
So, who cares if you found the dumbbell?
That's right. That's right.
And, he could have just burned that towel when he found it, and then he knows that Julia knows that's it, right? She can't do anything, and they already had the discussion that he can't be tried again. So.
Yeah. So, in some ways, I mean, I could see why Julia would be very worried about all of this, and she's definitely not played her hand well. But, he's unlikely to come at her and do a full-fledged murder, if he doesn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, really, what he should have done is when he saw the towel, burned it. When he found the rock instead of his dumbbell, thought, well, no one can do anything with that, and just gone home. Because obviously, if Julia knows, she's not going to want to interact with him anymore. Just go home, and then she can go home, and not much she can do without making herself look bad for getting him off.
Yeah, just get the money and go off.
Yeah,
to
go to the Caribbean with
yeah.
Sheila, who was already interested. So, can't see the benefit of anything David did in this episode. So his actions counteract the stupid things Julia have been doing too. People in the Orient Express are watching Santana through the skylight as she does her striptease for Keith. And she asks Keith to make love to her on the roof. Cruz arrives, and the maitre d' says, "Oh, I was just about to call the police." So Cruz tries to get up on the roof, and after some door blocking and arguing, Keith manages to climb down a ladder that goes to I don't know where, maybe 9 stories down. That's quite a climb. By the time Santana lets Cruz up onto the roof, and he suspects Keith is there, but cannot find him, obviously. Of course, on his way down, Keith said, "Oh, meet me at the beach at 10:30." So Cruz wonders if she's mixing her allergy pills with alcohol, because he is seeing the erratic behavior. At home, he decides the best thing to cure everything is to make love to Santana. So they go into the bedroom, and after a commercial break, she comes back out getting dressed, going, "You know what, you're not really into it." And then she goes to the beach to make love to Keith Timmons, who, after a short discussion, lets her climb on top of him. So whether they will go through with that, I don't know. Unless Cruz actually followed her in his car to the beach, no one really knows where they are. So if someone runs into them and stops them, it would be a totally random person, unless Cruz really did follow her.
However, I mean, they're basically, Cruz and Santana are just fighting this entire episode, and of course Santana's becoming more and more unhinged. But, Cruz does point out to her at one point that this is going to have an effect on Brandon. And obviously this is part of Gina's plan to get Brandon away from Santana. That does seem to give Santana a little bit of pause for thought, but then she goes careening off again. Makes me interested to see when we will see Rosa again and what her sort of role in this little drama will be, because I'm assuming that Brandon is currently with Rosa.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like she's going to step in and have something to say at some point about this whole situation.
Gina could actually potentially fall out of the bushes at the beach and put a kibosh on that. But really, do we care if Santana sleeps with with Keith? I kind of think would be a better direction for her. So,
yeah, they seem to actually get on better in many ways than Cruz and Santana anyway. And we know that Cruz would actually prefer to be with Eden if possible. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the two couples, I think Santana and Keith are better suited for each other, and obviously more into each other, and obviously Cruz and Eden are the couple of this series. So that will all make sense, and I'm sure at some level or another this will happen, but what the wreckage will be when it comes to Brandon and his situation, we don't know yet.
I think they may stir in a new character that we meet at the reunion that might even add to it too.
Yeah.
Pearl does a Roosevelt, Lincoln, and Carter impression throughout the episode. He's eating peanuts at one point. He mysteriously produces glasses from various pockets for his various characters. As I said, it's being played for laughs. He meets his new roommate, Owen, which, once they said his name, I kind of remembered that Pearl had a roommate, Owen. Don't remember anything about Owen's story, though. So he's very quiet and shy, similar to Alice, but not as bad. He's verbal, and he does tell Pearl, "Don't go outside. Dr. Rawlings likes to patrol." So Pearl goes outside and sneaks into Kelly's room to let her know he's in there undercover, and not to let on his name's not Cooknick. Rawlings hears them talking and comes in as Pearl dives under the bed. And he says, "Who were you talking to?" And Alice pipes up and says, "We were just chatting about the movie." Not quite. But Rawlings is shocked that Alice has spoken her first words in years. So clearly, Alice is just being quiet for whatever trauma maybe that she had suffered. And definitely we've seen before her negative reactions to any perceived injustice done to Kelly or others by Dr. Rawlings. So I think we now may, now that she's talking, we may get a bit into Alice's story to help extend Kelly's time in the state hospital, because really there's only so many times you can do the same scene of not eating your pills. So having these other characters like Owen and Alice will make the months not seem to drag on as much as they have, stuff going on other than being stuck there. Yeah, and bizarrely he tells Kelly to keep up the good work, considering how much he's punished her for talking to Alice.
Yeah, that actually sort of surprised me, and I suppose does add another layer to Dr. Rowling's characters. He is genuinely delighted that Alice has spoken, which makes me think that yet another part of Rowling's character, or perhaps part of his problem, is that he's actually doesn't maybe have a life outside of the hospital. The fact that he has the time and energy and inclination to patrol the hallways after hours makes me think that his whole life is the hospital and what is going on with the patients.
I mean, being a soap opera, you immediately think, oh, he's evil. But he could just be some guy with a God complex who thinks that his methodologies will be the best to cure the patients, even though they're obviously, to us, the viewer, and probably to Brian, having a negative effect. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if there's a change in Rowling's character with that or not. He's got Pearl to torture now. And that is it. There were only these 3 storylines running through the show. And we had a cast credits in this episode, and finally we have seen a shake-up. As we, have long been awaiting, Kirk Cranston, Robert Newman, is no longer in the credits. Dylan Hartley, Paige Mosley, is no longer in the credits. Eden Capwell Cranston is still being billed as Eden Capwell Cranston, even though she got a divorce in the last episode. So I expect that we'll switch back to Eden Capwell maybe soon. But 3 other people have left the cast this week. One of them is Dr. Rawlings, who's been bumped back down to
Day
player or guest cast or whatever you call it. So does that mean they don't have another 3 months of story for him? Because I think these contracts are usually in 3-month batches. Maybe Kelly and Pearl will be getting out of there a lot sooner than I thought. But one of the other. Do you want to guess who the other 2 were?
No, I'm never good at guessing these things.
Brandon Capwell is no longer in the main cast, so that's interesting. Since it is summertime and the actor wouldn't have school, you'd think that'd be the best time to have him as a full-time cast member, and then dial it back, starting in September. But it seems to have been the opposite. And I guess, can we predict, just as we're thinking maybe the Kelly storyline is ending soon, is the Gina Brandon Santana custody thing gonna somehow take a turn that they won't need Brandon? I presumed that they were going to need Brandon for Santana does something terrible while on crack, so Brandon is endangered. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many episodes he appears in actually now, because since he's been added to the cast, I was surprised at how few times we've actually seen him, even in an episode where they were talking about him, and he could have been in there. And the other character has already gone from the show completely. Yesterday, or Friday, was their last episode. So we will never see Justin Moore again.
Wow.
So that is really interesting. With Courtney being slotted in as the go-between to going to the hospital with Pearl, presumably we'll just see Courtney say, oh, I reported back to Justin. And then when the storyline ends, presumably no one gets any closure with Justin.
Now, if I had guessed, I would have actually said Nick, because he doesn't really have a storyline with Kelly incarcerated. But and it would seem to me that they might still need Justin to get Pearl out and everything.
It's actually a surprise when I saw that was his last episode.
Yeah.
And, the summer, as I said, I was working the summer of '86, so only heard these on audio for the most part, although I seem to be remembering some of these scenes. And definitely have no idea how any of the storylines played out. The only thing that I remembered, as I mentioned a few times, is that kept saying Pearl and Kelly have an adventure together and this is it. But I don't remember anything about it. Just that I, kind of thought Dr. Rawlings was a bad guy. But we will see. And, I have no idea what Nick does for the rest of the time on the show. And I think that is it for this episode. So we will be back after we watch the Tuesday episode, number 486. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
As you can see, Christmas has come and gone, and we've opened up our gifts, and one of the most exciting things I got was this Santa Barbara fan book that I had ordered from Germany. It seems like in the early days of the pandemic that finally arrived in the fall. And it is quite thick. This is, of course, an unofficial publication. All these copyrighted photos have been used as a fan publication. I don't know if the laws in Germany are different, but quite possibly. Limited time to get these. They are doing a second printing. The website has some photos of what's inside, and I'll be doing sort of a add-on to my unboxing video later where I actually show some photos. So keep an eye out for that. Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 486 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, June 24th, 1986. June, I guess, is summery in California. Don't know how warm it would be to sleep on the beach. I guess we're going to find out. But first, up in the forest, Deke the forest ranger stops by the cabin to let Julia and David know about a bear sighting. But Julia can't bring herself to tell him that David's a killer. So he leaves again. David demands to know where she hid the dumbbell. And either she tells him or he figures it out. I couldn't quite catch the audio. And while he has the dumbbell, she manages to lock herself in the bathroom again and get that window open. David chops down the door with the axe. Deke had mentioned a ranger station down the road, and that's where Julia finds herself. She breaks into the closed-up station, thinks about calling the police, but remembers David saying he can't be tried twice and decides she's not going to bother. Then David phones her and says, well, there's really only one place you could have been, so I'm going to come down and explain to you why I didn't kill Madeline. So while she's waiting for David, she breaks into the gun cabinet and gets herself a rifle. So that may be the first smart thing she's done since she found the dumbbell. David arrives to say, Sheila's the one that killed Madeline, but in his usual, not quite convincing way. So you can see why Julia still doesn't believe him. And then Sheila shows up with her own gun. And I think at this point I'm inclined to think that Sheila may be the killer. I also think this may end with Sheila shooting David and Julia shooting Sheila.
Yeah, I feel like David and Julia were not really at their best in this episode. David, for some reason, decides to hack down the bathroom door with his axe. And, as you said, he doesn't really need to do any of that. He certainly doesn't need to pursue her to the cabin because he's completely out of danger for being prosecuted for the crime of killing Madeline. And I think if he was just really chill, even if Julia had the sense, which she clearly doesn't, to convince someone that she was in danger, he could easily, if he's just relaxed and calm about things, even that he could blow off. So I don't really understand why he does anything. And Julia, of course, is yet again a complete basket case in this episode. She's running around in her bathrobe. She doesn't have the sort of sense to maybe find an excuse to hitch a ride into town or whatever with the police officer who comes to the door. She wouldn't even have to do a full song and dance about, David being guilty. She could just find a reason that she needs to go into town with him. And then she runs off to the ranger station. And again, there's absolutely no reason for her not to tell the police that she's feeling threatened. if she feels that it is illogical that David was the threat, she could even talk about the bear. I don't know, but there's no reason for her to hang up the phone and just go for a gun. So I don't feel like she's thinking very clearly, and I do feel like Sheila must have been watching them for a while, because I don't know how else she would know how to go to the ranger station.
Yeah, that could be. Rosa discovers that Haley has been sleeping in her old room. Ted decides that rather than let Cece find out, he would rather sleep on the beach with Haley. In order to keep Ted from freezing to death, Haley eventually lets him into the one sleeping bag for sleep only.
I wondered why I'm assuming Ted uses a car to get to and from work. I wondered why they didn't sleep in his car if he has one. Or it also occurred to me that they could even maybe bunk out at the radio station.
Yeah, especially since Eden had said, why don't you just check her into the hotel for tonight?
Yeah,
Eden
was
she owns a hotel.
Yeah.
She was willing to let Haley, have a room from the way I interpreted it. So, not that Ted couldn't afford it. Well, maybe he can't because he wanted to go it on his own, I think. Santana and Keith make love on a different beach at Bailey's Cove, I think they called it. She misses her pickup time, and so Cruz must go to Rosa's to get Brandon. Rosa asks Cruz if he even loves Santana at all, and he says he cares very deeply for her. It's just what your wife's mom wants to hear. Eden tells Cruz that the reason for his marriage is over. Santana arrives to pick up Brandon, and Keith arrives shortly after, much to Santana's surprise, to say, "Oh yeah, I told Eden I wanted to talk to her today." Eden notices that both Santana and Keith have sand on their shoes, to which Keith replies, "She lives by the beach, doesn't she?" Eden writes Cruz another letter. Back home, Cruz tells Santana, "I'm a lot better detective than you're giving me credit for."
And I felt I'd been saying the last time that I was interested to see what Rosa's take was, and Rosa certainly is very aware that Cruz and Santana are having problems in their relationship. I think she's a little bit defensive about Santana. At one point she sort of says to Cruz, "Are you blaming all this on Santana?" And he says, No, I'm not. And she gives Cruz a good hearing. And it did occur to me that if Eden and Cruz had put together, the relationship between Keith and Santana, with them both having sand on their shoes and kind of both coming in sort of breathless and exhilarated at the same time, that perhaps Rosa was putting that together as well.
Yep.
Rosa does not look happy this episode.
No, I was happy to see Rosa again and to be involved in two different stories. And she was really concerned about Cece finding out about Haley. I think things are inching. Well, Santana and Keith have slept together now, so things are not just inching along in that storyline. I think, that's going to be a turning point there.
But, it does occur to me that Gina if she wants Brendan back, she's going to have to really destroy Santana's reputation as a parent, because Santana moving from Cruz to Keith doesn't necessarily help Gina's cause.
And Keith, being the district attorney, could be able to pull some strings.
Yeah.
To keep Brandon with Santana. That is it for this episode. It's a Tuesday. I forgot to mention from yesterday's credits, Gary Owen. Sorry, try again. Gary Allen is playing Owen, Pearl's roommate, and Dr. Rawlings is back in the date player section. That's it for episode 486. The credits were cut off today, so I don't know if there were any. We'll be back when we've watched 487. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 487 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, June 25th, 1986. Pearl gets Kelly to realize who he is, and she wonders why he's pretending to be someone else. And he says he's investigating Dr. Rawlings. Talks very briefly about why. And Rawlings accidentally leaves his briefcase in one of the, looks like just a common room. And the orderly tells the nurse, or vice versa, and they decided to just leave it sitting there. But, of course, Pearl and Kelly have overheard this and decide to look through it, and they find a bunch of those little mini cassettes. And when they play one, it is Dr. Rawlings' evaluations of Kelly. And she says, why is he saying these things about me? And interestingly enough, they all seem to be accurate. Mm-hmm. He did then talk about potential treatment and ended with, perhaps electroshock therapy will be needed.
And I feel like this is, you know, when you introduce a gun into a storyline, it has to be used at some point. And I think electroshock therapy treatment is going to be a real and present danger at some point in this plot.
Now remember when Kelly had Dr. Renfro's auto-mnemonic limbic retrograder threatened with, she actually had it applied to her and it wiped out her memory and messed her up for several months. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that's where they're planning to go with Kelly and have her messed up for a few months? Rather than, you know, this being the end of her troubles, this could be just phase one of a multi-part story.
Yeah, I think that's possible. We know that Robin Wright does go off at various points during her time on Santa Barbara to complete movies, so yeah, that might sync up with this plot line. It was nice to see a little bit of the old Kelly in this, where she's hooking up with someone on a crazy adventure. And this time it's Pearl.
Yeah, that's a nice pair, I think. Courtney visits, but only because she says it's a family emergency. And Pearl says, well, you're not going to be able to use that one again. Gina gets a new shipment of crack. There's now an intermediary character, not Angel, who delivers it to her. And Gina tells Keith that Brandon is her son. She's trying to explain her animosity towards Santana. He doesn't seem too moved by it, though, in the end. Keith calls Santana, and she pretends it's Rosa, so Cruz doesn't catch on. Says, oh, is Rosa asking me to come over? Of course, suddenly Cruz has to go to work, and now, of course, Santana can't go anywhere because Brandon. So she's not as out of it as Gina might have been in that situation to leave Brandon alone. But she invites Keith over. And then when he comes over, she doesn't want to fool around anywhere where Brandon could catch them. And Keith finds a pile of his files at the beach house, because earlier Cruz had requested them. He is trying to look at why Keith Timmons manages to close all these cases successfully when on the surface of it there may not have been sufficient evidence. And he is wondering about potential behind-the-scenes dealings that Keith might have been doing in order to get these cases solved or closed.
Yes, and we're seeing open up another potential conflict between Cruz and Santana. When he phones his office to request these files, she's listening in, and she doesn't look very happy. So I have a feeling that if push comes to shove, she may be Team Keith on this investigation rather than Team Cruz, and I think that will push them farther apart.
And I think if Cruz finds that he's got a penchant for, dealing behind the scenes, this might not bode well for Kelly either.
Yeah.
When she's ready to stand trial. After Keith leaves, Gina shows up unexpectedly at Santana's, which really flusters Santana. And she said, oh, Keith, implied that you said that you thought we were having an affair. Well, he's just an old high school friend. And Gina's response is, well, it's nice that you were able to stay in touch with each other. Father Metcalf tells Mason and Mary that the annulment could take 6 months to a year. And that he needs to meet face-to-face with Mark. Mary tells Mason they should just forget about the annulment because she doesn't want Mark to know about the baby. And Mason thinks that's weird. He thinks, oh, that'll drive a further wedge between you. Why wouldn't you want to know? So he secretly calls Mark in the Caribbean, and as he's waiting for Mark to come to the phone, Mary realizes what he's doing and tells him to hang up.
I'm hoping this will be followed at some point by her explaining the situation to Mason vis-a-vis Mark raping her, because the longer she leaves that, the harder this is going to be.
I think this is going to be. I actually think this will be the thing that makes her tell him, and then either Mason will think, okay, let's just try and get him to agree to a divorce or something, without letting him know about the baby, or he'll go the other way and say, well, we should put him on trial. I do work for the DA after all.
Yeah.
I mean, how much evidence is there, though? Sheila and David each claim that the other killed Madeline. And David also says he cares for Julia and used to care for Sheila, but the only person he ever loved was Madeline. Once again, David doing totally bizarre things. And before Sheila can shoot them all, Cruz arrives. I don't know how he got there, why he got there, but he arrives and takes them in for questioning. I would have thought that Deke, the forest ranger, would be the one who at least has a reason to blunder into the situation and maybe rescue Julia. But between Cruz getting a call into work because someone had injured themselves on the job and him suddenly being at the cabin, I have no idea what series of events could have led to that.
Well, there was one point in the episode, and I was trying to connect it all up while I was watching, where Julia, she's listening to David and Sheila accusing each other. She's so disappointed with the whole situation with David, and she's just kind of over it. And she says, you know what, I'm just going to call the police. And then I don't think we really see her call them, but I don't think we really see her not call the police.
I think what happened was Sheila tried to stop her, and Julia pulled the trigger on Sheila's gun, and it turns out there were no bullets in it. And Sheila took the opportunity to grab the rifle and hold that on them, on David and Julia, which is how Cruz found
But I'm thinking that before that, there was a point where Julia had the gun on.
Yeah, but as she was picking up the phone, that's when Sheila went to stop her. So maybe she dialed the operator, and the operator sent someone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking it must be something like that, maybe maybe Cruz was a little bit worried about his conversation with Julia earlier, where she was saying everything was fine, and then maybe if she managed to get the call in, maybe that triggered something.
It's a cabin up in the middle of nowhere, so it would have taken some time for Cruz to get there on top of everything.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things that has happened a few times, and quite often right at the end of a storyline, where suddenly a weird thing happens, and suddenly everyone's back in Santa Barbara and it's all over.
Yeah.
So after the questioning, Cruz tells Julia he doesn't think either of them killed Madeline, and he lets them go. And David manages to have an encounter with Courtney on the way out the door, too. And Courtney wonders, if they didn't kill Madeline, who did?
Yeah, and so we're left with this mystery. Luckily, Julia seems to be over David. And I have to say that Nancy Grund does some really nice acting in this episode. At least that came out of it. And, Julia, I think, really bears her heart during this episode. And she says, I was just so lonely and I just wanted to believe this was real.
Mm-hmm.
And it really gives a good window into her motivations through this whole storyline.
Yeah, she ends up crying in Cruz's arms at the end of the episode. When both Sheila and David were telling their stories earlier to Julia, they showed us flashbacks, and we got to see Madeline again, because we've only seen 2/3 of her episodes so far.
Mm-hmm.
And she was in one flashback where Sheila says she came in and Madeline was already on the floor with the dumbbell there. And then David says he came in and the dumbbell was still there and he picked it up thinking Sheila had killed. Because I think Madeline said Sheila, didn't she? So, but assuming Sheila did actually come in when she was already there. Not sure who did it or why she wouldn't name that person instead.
So, do you think this is the last we will see of David and Sheila, or do you think they'll be kind of drifting around the periphery of the episodes?
Well,
this mystery
I can tell you that neither actor appears in the show ever again.
Okay.
So that's it for the Sheila and David storyline. But the Who Killed Madeline storyline has taken a very long detour with no actual hints as to who it could be. I mean, I'm back to my earlier thoughts of, could Augusta have really actually known about Lionel meeting Madeline? And the other idea that I had was, could Courtney actually be crazy? Those are really my only two thoughts. Or, Grant may have had a reason, but I really don't see that one.
Yeah, I mean, it would be quite a step to kill your own daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a wacky.
I see it as being ruthless, possibly, got the same sort of sociopathic tendencies that we see from CC every once in a while, but I don't see him as being deranged. So.
Yeah. We're going to now have another series of people who were at the bungalow that gets revealed,
Yeah, or maybe some connection we don't know about yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe it'll be tangentially related to the Lionel Grant thing. Maybe there's another person involved in that they'll suddenly bring up. Yeah, but that was it's for the middle of the week. They resolved the storyline in the middle of the week. And, Julia's now going to be probably have some emotional fallout for the next little while.
Yeah, and probably I think she's still got some work to do rebuilding her relationship with Augusta and Lionel as well.
Yeah, I don't know who Julia will fall for next. If a psycho comes into town. If Dylan were still alive. They did have that first scene together on the beach. The ghost of Dylan and Julia. That's it for episode 487. We'll be back when we watch episode 488. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, counselor, I thought you were off in the woods somewhere. Killer bees scare you off, or was it the killer boyfriend?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 488 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, June 26th, 1986. Last night on Canon, we saw Alejandro Rey, who played Dr. Ramirez early on in the series, in an episode called Treasure of San Ignacio.
Looking much, much younger than he does in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm. Jane is annoyed when she hears that Haley and Ted plan to become roommates. Haley tells Jane, well, I'll get Ted to sign a contract that he'll do laundry if that makes you happy. As listeners start calling in, hoping that Ted and Roxanne will go out on a date, Ted puts out a call to all those listeners to ask for suggestions for places that they can rent. Mm-hmm. Roxanne calls in to suggest she and Ted could maybe room together. Haley and Ted look at a place that's perfect until Haley finds out that it's actually the address that Roxanne recommended. Mm-hmm. She's worried about some potential stalkers stalking Ted.
And I think that's probably a wise thing to be nervous about, if indeed this storyline is influenced or inspired by the movie Play Misty for Me.
Mm. Cece wonders to Sophia if Ted's moving out is to punish him. And he ends up having a conversation with Ted that does not go well, and he realizes that later when he's talking to Sophia. Mary is upset to find out that Mason did call Mark behind her back and that Mark is in town, and he shows up with his beard shaved off. Mm-hmm. And Mary lets slip to Mark that she's pregnant. So we will see exactly how Mark reacts in the next episode.
And it occurs to me that with Dylan gone and both Ted and Mark having shaved their beards, the influence of the Kenny Loggins era is coming to an end.
Yes, I wonder if I'll have any more beards. Mason spots Julia being consoled by Augusta. And he says to Julia, I thought you were in the woods. Did the killer bees scare you off, or was it the killer boyfriend? So he hasn't heard yet about what's happened, and he spends the episode making jabs at Julia. Rich, who I think we saw before some time ago, asking Julia out on a date that we never saw happen, offers to buy Julia a drink, and then she declines his offer of dinner and seems to think that she's some kind of a joke down at the law courts.
She's scraped rock bottom with Rich, apparently.
When Mason does find out that David and Sheila left town together, he tries to console Julia by saying he only insulted her skills in court to unnerve her. So it's nice of Mason. Julia's basically just sulking around the Orient Express for the whole episode.
No, I'm assuming that perhaps David and Sheila did end up in the Caribbean after all of this. Since
A
they had
happy
the
ending.
tickets. A happy ending for someone.
And I guess, does he get the 10 million? I guess he does.
I guess so.
Wow. Grant shows up at the Capwell mansion, and it seems to be quite a bit like he remembered. I guess their father built it, I think. Although he says Cece has put a lot of unnecessary decoration in it. Maybe referring to all those paintings on the wall. Does he know they're fake yet? I don't think so. He wants to see his old room, which apparently now is Ted's room. So that's an interesting piece of history in the canon of the Capwells. And he tells Cece that he sympathizes with Lionel. It's very hard to be driven out of your home. You wouldn't miss this place, would you? Inferring the fact that he is about to have Cece kicked out of his own mansion. But Cece doesn't pick up on any of that. And then Grant also adds an interesting comment. When's the last time you sent Pamela money? Which makes me think Grant and Pamela are in touch.
Yeah, we've heard Pamela's name come up in relation to this storyline a few times now. So I think she is perhaps a greater presence in Grant's life than she is in Cece's, potentially.
Maybe she sometimes goes to him for money. I don't know. Grant says that Ted seems to be a bright fella since he's moving out of Cece's house. Since it's their anniversary, Cece takes Sophia to the beach where they were married. Now, this may be not 100% correct because, unfortunately, the final scene of theirs together on the beach was 100% in French. And much as I like to pretend I understand French, I really didn't get any of it. Except for the final line, which I have translated as, "Tonight I am your husband."
So maybe a little bit of romance rekindling between the two of them.
And then, most annoyingly, the only other scene in French is the scene between Augusta, Lionel, and Grant, where everything is revealed. I mean, there's a little conversation, and then Lionel signs the papers, so that part was, you didn't really need to understand it. But then, as Grant learns who framed him, I'm afraid that I actually missed completely the name, but I did hear the name Pamela at the end of the scene, so I assumed it was Pamela. But I thought, well, Santa Barbara Online has summaries of the episodes, so why don't I go there and find out that, in fact, the person who framed Grant for the embezzlement was none other than T. MacDonald Lockridge, Lionel's father. So that's something neither of us guessed. And it's interesting having it be a deceased character because no one can really be punished for it, which is I can see why Lionel was so insistent on keeping it a secret until he had guaranteed that he was going to get all this stuff back. Because obviously that's not going to 100% satisfy Grant.
Yeah, and it. I did when we finally figured out that was what was being said in the scene. I did wonder a bit at the logistics of it. Like, how did a Lockridge manage to embezzle something from a Capwell? It would have been actually a lot easier if it had been Pamela who was involved. So I don't know what the logistics are of that. I don't know if we'll find out much about the logistics of that. But it is interesting.
I'm intrigued at the possibility that we might have flashbacks with either all the actors playing younger versions of themselves or recast, depending on how long ago it was. And it also reminds me about the fact that Augusta and Julia's parents were real estate con artists. So
Yeah.
could they perhaps have, maybe that's how they knew the Lockridges, through some business with T. McDonald Lockridge, you know?
Yeah, and how much did Minx know, too? That's an interesting question as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because Minx always seems to know a little bit more about things than anyone gives her credit for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hoping that when they reiterate this next time, it'll be in English so we can get maybe the full story and then we don't miss any of the good stuff. It was all fine when Amy was having her baby in French because no one cared about that. And that is it for our Thursday episode. So Friday, maybe we'll have a nice cliffhanger. Definitely Mark is probably going to go nuts in this episode. And we'll see exactly how clever Grant is, whether he somehow figured out a way to cheat Lionel out of getting what he's owed, and how his revenge on Cece won't be quite as good because Cece didn't actually do it. But he should still be entitled to half of Emmett Capwell's estate. So,
of course, on the other hand, we may spend the entire next episode in the mental institution with Kelly and Pearl.
Might be some new presidents.
Or we might see a little bit more of the Cruz, Keith, Santana, Eden quadrangle.
And maybe next week is time for the class reunion. I don't know. Let me just check on something here because we're coming up on the holidays. Let me just see if next week is... And next week only has 3 episodes. The 30th, the 1st, and the 2nd of July. The 3rd and 4th of July were preempted. So we're only getting 3 episodes next week. So maybe we'll get the reunion and some kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right. We will see you after we watch the Friday episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Why would I make something like this up? I know how much you'd hate the person that would tell you this. I almost didn't tell you.
You know, I know it's in your nature to indulge in this particular kind of community service, but I suggest you bury your nose in your own life for a change.
It'll excite you. Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 489 of Santa Barbara. Aired Friday, June 27th, 1986, wrapping up the 100th week of Santa Barbara on television on NBC. Ted and Haley move into their new apartment, and Ted starts to fill the waterbed. As you might guess, Santa Barbara summertime teen scene fun time means that hilarity ensues as they try to fill up the waterbed. Haley finds a giant blow-up Godzilla, which Ted dubs Dadzilla. And to top it off, he brings out the Mason cutout to go along with it. But all is not happy at the new Shay, Ted, and Haley because Haley's clearly concerned about something the entire episode. And as they get closer and closer to bedtime, she really has to say to Ted, you know what, I think this is moving way too fast and we're skipping over the early part of our relationship. And I think that's a mistake. And he agrees. So he says he's going to find another apartment tomorrow and he'll sleep in the next room. So they have another room, unless that was the bathroom.
So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds because if there is a stalker involved, I guess it will be Haley who will be there alone and Ted will moved off somewhere else.
I didn't even think of that. That's
so we might actually see some sort of a confrontation between Haley and the mysterious, what's her name? Roxanne?
Roxanne. That's a good point, yeah. Danny, of course, not involved this summer. Alice, possibly the right age range to be involved in summertime fun time, but she sits in the corner not speaking. So will she get out in time to join the fun? Who knows? Mark tells Mary he could be the father of her baby, but agrees not to interfere with the annulment. But by the end of the episode, Mason can't help but tell Mark that he and Mary never had a real marriage, which prompts Mark to tell Mason he'd better be a good father because that little boy or girl just might be mine. So, pretty much what we said. At some point, Mason was going to Mark. At one point, Mason was going to rub Mark the wrong way, and he would spill it, and vice versa. That Mary would. Mary actually just told Mark. He didn't find out accidentally, so that was the one thing we didn't guess correct.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. I mean, even if Mark doesn't throw up any roadblocks to their annulment, the damage is sort of done, because, of course, Mary has not told Mason about this, and we had an interesting little speech by Mason in an earlier episode where he says something to the effect that the worst thing that could happen is if Mary was untruthful to him. So we'll have to see how this goes.
Lionel and Grant tried to get Mason in on their revenge against Cece by telling him that it involves Pamela. I feel like they're being a little cagey about how it includes Pamela, because really there's no Pamela-related reason, I don't think, for Mason to be involved. But Grant does tell Mason that he was in love with Pamela before Cece took her and his inheritance from him. And then Grant offers Mason the role of first executive officer when he gets half of Capwell Enterprises. So this is interesting. They're offering, Mason a role in the new company and playing on the known differences between him and Cece that probably Madeline reported back to Grant. And of course, Lionel is not unfamiliar with. So, but one thing that I think as a soap opera viewer when I watch this scene is, could Grant be Mason's father? That's very similar to a lot of storylines where someone marries one of two brothers and turns out they're secretly already pregnant with the other brother. So that's potential future storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we see how previous storylines are starting to kind of weave together, because would this offer be as attractive to Mason if he weren't being thrown under the bus by Keith? Working at the district attorney's office.
Good point.
That I think plays into it for sure. And if CC had been a little more gentle in his handling of Mason since coming back from his coma, would that also make this whole deal as attractive to Mason if Mason were actually getting along with CC? So.
I mean, just from the fact that I think Lionel has to get his house back, I feel like the plan will work. And then we'll see Mason, in a company that's at least as valuable as Cece's company. So then maybe Julia can get a job at the district attorney's office in Mason's slot. Because clearly defense attorney didn't work too well for her. Before we see Mason again, however, the storyline continues off-screen because Eden gets informed that Mason has been snooping around the company archives, or the family archives, I can't quite remember. But she gets a call from the security guard. So this is, as we find out in a later scene, Mason researching everything that Grant and Lionel have told him. It's a busy night down on the beach because Eden is using a couple of Orient Express staff members to help Cece prepare a dinner for Sophia, who, of course, is already on the beach with Cece from the earlier episode, but now there's a dinner involved. So we had those two people in the familiar red uniforms of Capitol Enterprises, and Eden just hanging out at the beach bar, directing it all. Eden suggests to Cece that maybe tonight's the night to tell Sophia that he knows that she had cancer surgery, but he doesn't feel like it's the right time. I'm wondering if this is a potential rift for Cece and Sophia in the future, if she finds out that he knew and didn't say anything. I don't know.
I feel like there'd have to be more to it than that.
Yeah, but the fact that they brought it up again, I don't know if it's going to go become something more. Speaking of Misty, Cece puts on some music. We don't see how, presumably a tape, and he plays Misty, which was played at their wedding, and they dance on the beach. Now, you had thought that the Roxanne storyline could be indicative of them doing a play-on-play Misty for Me, so we wonder if that's a little clue by the writers.
Maybe.
Mason arrives at the beach with a very old document in his hand saying that proves that Cece made Grant look like an embezzler. I don't think Cece really looks at the document much, and of course Sophia's there having her evening interrupted, but Mason includes her in the conversation by saying, "I wouldn't hitch your wagon to Dad's star. I think it's about to Nova. We've got enough information to make you lose Capwell Enterprises. And when the castle crumbles, you might just get buried in the debris."
Now, remember, she is independently wealthy at this point, so
That's true.
I would think it would be emotional debris rather than financial debris.
She's got her own multinational company to run, which she runs it as actively as any Days of Our Lives cast member runs their business that they're the CEO of, i.e. hangs out on the beach a lot.
I'm more willing to believe that Sophia has delegated most of the authority to some sort of managing CEO or something, and is mainly just the owner of it.
Jerry, one of the caterers that Eden is using, suggests that what Eden needs is to party with him at a fabulous club in Montecito, and she agrees. And we see her dressed up for the rest of the episode. And presumably they're heading out to that club towards the end of the episode.
And I don't remember if we visited Montecito. I always think of it as more of a sort of high-end neighborhood full of mansions rather than being a party destination.
Isn't that where the Capwell Mansion is?
Yeah, it could
think
be.
so.
That would make sense.
So, somewhere in the non-residential area, there's a club. Everything's 5 minutes away, so I mean, they get to the hotel pretty quick from their house. And, of course, the waterfront's really close. Gina tells Cruz she knows where Santana is and what she's up to, and she wants to help him out because of all Cruz and Eden did for her. Cruz kicks her out. Santana's waiting at the Orient Express to have dinner with Cruz when Keith arrives, and he says he got her message. I don't know if we saw this in the last one, but my suspicion is Gina sent him a fake message.
Could be, yeah.
She says, "Oh, I didn't leave you a message." And then she takes a pill and wonders if maybe she forgot that she called him, which she says out loud, so Keith would find this worrying, you would think. Keith invites Santana to the beach. Gina follows Keith, and by the time Cruz arrives at the Orient Express, Santana is angry that he's taken so long, and he says he got delayed when someone showed up at the Capwell house. I think she thinks it's Eden, but of course it was Gina, so it's kind of funny. Gina's actually zipped up to the Orient Express, followed Keith down to the beach bar, gets back to the Orient Express, all while Cruz is still, working his way around.
Now, this, of course, is the 80s. Otherwise, I would kind of picture Gina on a little e-scooter or something, zipping around.
That would be
all
funny.
these locations.
Little helmet. He says he got delayed when someone showed up at the Capwell house, and Santana says, "It's all right, I don't blame you for preferring someone else's company." And then she runs out, and Gina stops Cruz from following him by saying, "Oh, I know where she's going, and you don't want to see it." Cruz accuses Gina of just trying to make Santana look bad so she can get Brandon. Oh, once again, same old story. Eden and Jerry are at the back at the Orient Express at this point, and they watch as Gina says, "I see Santana come in with a certain gentleman from time to time." And Eden chimes in, "Keith Timmons, they're old high school friends." And Gina says, "Do old high school friends meet at the beach snack bar in the middle of the night?" So then Santana arrives at the beach bar, which, as we know, is just a short way down the beach from where Mason and Cece and Sophia are having a chat. And Keith says he thinks there's someone else nearby, clearly referring to that little party, so that they should maybe go somewhere else. she says, oh, maybe we should just put everything in the open. He says, well, in my position, I can't be seen with you as long as you're married.
Mm-hmm.
As they leave, Eden appears. And they make it seem like Eden actually had overheard the whole thing. And at one point they heard a noise, which is why they decided to leave right away. I think that might have been Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Cruz arrives, Eden says, there's nobody here. So I wonder if Eden saw Santana and Keith leaving and decided just won't mention it.
Yeah, it's a little bit unclear. One thing I might have expected, if they'd completely missed them, is that one of them would suddenly look down and there's like Santana's earring or something to give them away. But we didn't have that kind of thing. So I'm wondering myself if maybe they want to make it a little bit of a mystery as to whether Eden actually saw them or not.
But I think since Gina is orchestrating all of these near misses anyway, she just has to bide her time for if she wants to set something up where Cruz will catch them.
Oh yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. And certainly getting Santana hooked on crack, although I have to say that I don't think her judgment's been the best, even without that, in many respects. So, yeah, I feel like this might be coming to a bit of a head at the reunion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe Santana. I bet that reunion is going to be at the Orient Express. What do you think?
I don't think it'll be at the State Street Bistro.
Well, normally it would be
Or
in
La
the old
Mesa.
school or something, but I have a feeling Santana's going to have a breakdown on that dance floor one way or another. Eden says to Cruz to end the episode, in a way, I wish that Santana was weak, so I could be weak too. Of course, she was just secretly spying on them. So, yeah, I think this is going to go in the very obvious trajectory. We had credits again. Last time we had credits was Monday, episode 485, although there was one episode in between the credits got cut off, so we don't know if there were cast credits, but almost the same as last time, except now Eden Capwell appears in the credits, not Eden Capwell Cranston. So they've rectified that condition. And in the day players, or whatever it's called, Grant Capwell is John Considine, and Drew is Eric Bowles. Drew is Pearl's roommate that we met briefly. And that is it for episode 489 and week 100 of Santa Barbara. And Monday is June 30th, and so we'll be moving into July, the 12th month of the year, to close out the second full year of Santa Barbara. And as usual, I'll be doing some extras after the start of the third year to sort of summarize, the births and deaths, the people who were jailed, and other stuff that happened in the second year. Number of rapes and imprisonments has gone drastically down this year. So far, but there's still a month. We'll be back for week 101 after we watch episode 490 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Sophia, if I were you, I wouldn't be in a hurry to re-hitch my wagon to Dad's Star. I think it's about to Nova. I think you're about to lose your kingdom, Dad. And when the castle crumbles, you just might get buried in the debris.
So this is your secret to dealing with C.C. Capwell? What a stroke of genius! Raise his cholesterol and then give him apoplexy when he sees Gina's grotesque little grin. Who does she think she is, Mother Hubbard?
Well, I had to let her finish her baking.
Oh, I know, and of course your heart just always goes out to half-baked women.
It'll excite you. It'll excite you. You could be falling for it all the time. Dancing on the borderline. It'll excite you. It'll excite you. You feel the life, the love you never knew. The things that it can do to you. It'll excite you.
Daytime on NBC.
It'll excite you.
It'll excite you.